welcome you to The AI Age Begins. It's a new series that we're going to be doing through this year here in Shack that's going to look systematically at the positive potential of AI, really kind of looking at the positive possibilities of AI. It's going to be a series of events here, like say every 2 months or so. We'll get to that a little bit later. It's also going to be producing a lot of video and also media off this because we think that a lot of these conversations are important to get out there. And so that's kind of the beginning of what's happening here. My name is Pete Leyden. I'm the founder of Reinvent Futures, which is the company that's basically putting this on and kind of pulling this together. But we have some other key players in the pieces here. We'll get to it in a second. And I'm also going to be the host and the curator of this from this for the series, but also for tonight. Now, what we're starting with is a few assumptions that we're not going to necessarily debate right now. We're going to basically start from the perspective that the arrival of generative AI last year was really a kind of a world historic moment. It's going to be seen in that way. It's the kind of the big bang that opened up AI to everyone. And that is really an important phase shift in it, really a tool that is going to give humans a step change in our capabilities. And so we're basically seeing this as this is the beginning of a new age of AI. Now, we had AI before. If you had data scientists and enough coders and enough kind of resources in a corporation or a government, you could do something with it in a limited way. But this is essentially opening up to all. The same way that essentially we opened up the internet to everyone in the explosion in the 90s. Now, again, my background is that I came here to San Francisco to work with the founders of Wired in the early days, and I kind of ran the magazine for a little bit in the heyday of the 90s. And it was a time of great optimism, but it was also a time of kind of much optimism, but not a lot of pushback. And so what we're trying to do here a little bit is to kind of get back into the frame of like thinking through the more positive and optimistic side of actually this world historical technology. Now, it's happening here in San Francisco. After everyone had written off San Francisco, it's like everyone, no, who wants to live in San Francisco? Let's all go to move to Miami. Of course, that's now reversed because, of course, this had been under the surface for about the last 5 years, and it just exploded out last year. And what better place to pull together some core conversations of some of the pressing, really questions around this really transformative new technology. And so last year, the precursor to this was another series that we said, which is kind of the prototype of this, in which we asked 3 key questions. And some of you actually were here, although most of you seem to be new to the Shack. We basically started just figuring out just an open mind. It's like, hey, what are the real implications of this? I mean, how big a deal is this? And we kind of established pretty quickly in a similar meeting of the minds with all kinds of AI experts that, oh my God, this is something that many of them had said they'd never expected to see in their lifetime. Honestly, they were so surprised by the kind of advance of that in just the last year. And then we started to think, okay, well, let's have a whole evening where we basically talked about the positive possibilities and really started to think, hey, anytime you got a new technology, let's think about the big picture of what's possible with this thing. And so we had a crazy, interesting conversations around that, very similar format, caught it in video, all that kind of stuff, put it out into the world, but essentially around that. And then we also did one on the actual risks, because those are the 3 key initial questions that everyone had at the time. It's like, okay, what are the, now I say actual risks, because we had a kind of a meeting of the minds that was really trying to narrow it down to what is really important and what really actually is risky and what do we really have to take care of. And so came up with that. Now, what has happened with the advent of this kind of tool of this magnitude, with this kind of capability, and arriving in such a quick fashion, is people started to freak out. And I think it's clear to say that the general public reaction to this, the media reaction to this, and also kind of the implications for a lot of political people to kind of do something about this, has been largely negative. I think it's been an overwhelmingly negative frame of this technology. And so what we're kind of thinking about to start this season of 6 events with this opener, which is a kind of overarching conversation for this first opening, is to think about what is the case for techno-optimism around AI. Now, I know techno-optimism has kind of gotten it's a loaded word for some people, and it's kind of been bandied around in different circles. It's kind of starting to polarize people. But I kind of want to just go back to the actual meaning of it, the meaning that we were grappling with 25 years ago at Wired, and I think is still relevant today. It's like we are generally optimistic about the potential of this technology. That's not to say that there's not some issues and risks. There's so many forums doing that. There are so many people dealing with that kind of aspect of this. We're not denying those issues. We're just saying we need to breathe life and give more space for a conversation of what can we actually do with this technology. Now, when you start thinking about, okay, how would we actually pull that off? Here we are, boom, you are here. We are sitting in the center of the world of a lot of incredible technological expertise. And so what we're doing here in a weird way is we're bringing together the way I see it, it's three giant networks. Now, one network, I would say, from my background of being at the early Wired, working through places like, some of you know, Global Business Network, working with Peter Schwartz and Stuart Brand, Long Now Foundation. There's a kind of a tech and innovation intelligentsia of the Bay Area. It actually works into, UC Berkeley, Stanford. There's a kind of a crew that has really been really smart about this. They're not the most famous or powerful people. They're not necessarily, they're certainly not the richest. But they're people that are really some of the smartest, most knowledgeable, most innovative people that really are grappling with tech. That's a network that I've been trying to work at and stitch together for 30 years now. There's another network that is essentially the upcoming generative AI, new founders, new energy here, which is coming from what they call Cerebral Valley. It's rooted in San Francisco, not the Valley right now. It's actually, you are sitting in one of the kind of ground zero for a lot of it right here. Shack 15, and we're going to hear for a minute here a little bit more about this. Shack 15 was literally had some of the formative hackathons that really kind of catalyzed this community last year. It actually has a membership here of founders, young founders, and innovators that essentially about, 2,500, I think it is right now, in the membership here. That is many of them, the cream of the crop, are actually here. I've been invited to this here, to come here to partake here. But there's a generative AI, this next generation, young people, mostly young, at least for a lot of the old folks here. So, and then the third thing that I think we wanted to pull together was the serious business energy, the kind of big companies, the enterprise companies that basically are already diving into this, have the resources to run with this early, but also have a responsibility and want to do the right thing here too. So there's like three meta networks that we're trying to bring together for this event here, but also for this series. Now, I'm just going to start with the narrative a little bit, just to give us a little juice, to kind of say what this series is assuming, where we're going from. We're not going to debate this. We're going to move from this point on. You don't have to totally buy it. But one is that we are watching a huge technological step change here. Technology historians say there's been about 25 fundamental game-changing general purpose technologies. The wheel, printing press, electricity, that level. We're in one of those now. That is for sure we've hit that one of those. I think it's a bigger deal than that. I think it's worth thinking about just that up until the basically Enlightenment, humans were kind of limited by their physical power and maybe what you could harness with animals, but it was essentially the machine, the steam engine that amplified our physical power. But up until now, anything to do with intelligence had to have a human brain attached to it. Until now. We are now crossing a threshold where the level of augmentation of humans is now entering intelligence and our mental capabilities. That's a kind of a threshold it's a shift in kind. And so once you kind of make that transition, we're looking at something that has absolutely transformative potential if you really apply that to all fields. We're just going to start with that. The second thing, this is a very big deal. The second thing is the speed of this. Now again, as someone who was here for the early Wired magazine, we've essentially spent the last 40 years, my career has been laying the foundation of essentially infrastructure needed for AI. And this is a key thing, which is first we had to ramp up the power of computers. We could not have done it 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Then we had to connect everything to the internet. My God, has that been a task for the last 30 years. And again, we had to then digitize all data. We had to get it all kind of collected. Then we had to put it all in the cloud. Anyone in business has spent the last 15 years doing the digital transformation. And then I would argue we really had to have some kind of powerful tech companies that like Google that could invest in this kind of AI research that really was some breakthroughs about 10 years ago. And only then could we get AI. Now, the reason I'm saying this is AI doesn't need infrastructure. It has the infrastructure. So this thing is going to move super fast. We're not going to have the time we had to kind of debate this last 25 years of how is the internet going to affect this or that. This is going to move fast. So those two things, speed and just scale of change here, is a big one. And so I would just say if we spent the last 40 years figuring out what a personal computer was and laying that foundation, we are now entering the next phase here with what the hell can we do with this stuff? And this is what's going to just really explode in all directions. And also with very little need. I mean, a lot of these Gen AI folks, they basically have 2 or 3 people on their staff and they can just, boom, take it off. That's a big difference. Now, the last thing I just want to say here is this is where the narrative struggle begins. Because anytime you have that kind of step change hitting that fast, it's going to freak people out. And so the first thing that really did happen here was people who kind of started to look at this and went, oh my God, what's going to happen here? And so that's where I think we've had the legitimate kind of reaction. I mean, human beings, you know, we're wired to kind of hear the rustle in the bushes and kind of run from the lion, right? That's the gene line that we all come from. It's the ones that survive, not the ones that said, it's no big deal. Listen to the wrestle. And so essentially, but we had this reaction and the media jumped on it. And now I think there's a lot of pressure on public officials to slow it down, cramp it up, constrain it. And I think this is, so what we're going to basically facing here is any new general purpose technology, you know, you come to it neutral, like what can it do? What's positive? What's negative? And then over time, usually you figure out, oh, there's a lot of cool things you can do. And then you start pushing down the risk. We essentially put a lot of innovation to kind of mitigate the risk, crowd it out of the space, and ultimately we institutionalize it with fire departments and, you know, electrical codes and stuff to say, okay, we can actually use this. So we've kind of done this from the beginning. You know, there's a discussion with fires, like the guy said, hey, I'm burning my hand, this sucks. And the guy said, yeah, but, you know, it sure does wonders for meat. You know, this raw meat's awesome. Or, you know, so there's a kind of discussion that who won? The people said, oh, let's do this fire thing. And then same thing with electricity. You know, people said, wow, it lights your home. But, you know, the other guy says, yeah, but you touch it, you're electrocuted. Well, we figured out how to deal with that, right? And so I think what we're in now is another one of these moments, which is like, holy shit, what can this thing do? And so what we're going to do here is not focus on the negative, not to deny it. That's going to happen. That stuff will happen. But in fact, we're going to try to pull the conversation a little bit into the positive. And that's what this first overview is going to be, and the next one, so we're going to do going forward.